This story is titled, My Girlfriend Cheated on Me with My Boss. So I gave them both a taste of karma. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying these stories and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps me bring you even more awesome content like this. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, about 22 years ago, I was working at a packing plant. Life wasn't exactly exciting, but it was stable, which was all I needed after ending a 4-year relationship. My girlfriend had cheated on me, and I was still picking up the pieces. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some distractions to keep my mind off things. That's when I met Lisa. She was the receptionist at work, newly divorced, and full of energy. She was funny, cute, and the kind of person who made everything seem a little lighter. We started hanging out after work, grabbing lunch here and there, and soon it turned into more. It wasn't love or anything, but it was easy. And after what I'd been through, easy sounded good. Things were fine for a while, but then Lisa started dropping hints about moving in together. One night, as we were sitting on her couch watching TV, she casually said, "You know, it'd be easier if you just lived here. Think about how much time we'd save." I laughed it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I wasn't ready for anything serious, and her timing felt off. Still, I figured maybe I was overthinking it. After all, I wasn't exactly eager to overanalyze a casual relationship. Around the same time, I was working a ton of overtime, trying to save up for a few things. Lisa seemed okay with it, but she'd occasionally make comments like, "You work too hard. Don't you want to spend time with me?" I brushed it off, thinking she was just trying to be sweet. Then, one Monday, a guy on my crew mentioned something strange. "Hey," he said during our break, "I saw Rick's car over by those apartments on Maple Street this weekend. Doesn't your girlfriend live over there?" Hikshia. I froze for a second, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, she does." "When was this?" "Saturday night," he said. Weird, right? He lives way out in Millwood. Weird didn't even begin to cover it. Rick, my boss, lived 30 miles away and had no reason to be at Lisa's apartment complex. My gut told me something was up, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe he was visiting someone else. Maybe it was a coincidence. But then I remembered Lisa's excuse from the weekend. She'd said she was going to the casino. That didn't sit right with me anymore. The next day, I decided to stop by Lisa's apartment after work. I didn't call ahead because I wanted to catch her off guard. When I knocked on her door, she hesitated before opening it. I could tell something was wrong right away. "Who is it?" she asked from behind the door. "It's me," I said. When she opened the door, I saw him, Rick, standing in the hallway, looking like he wanted to disappear. When Lisa opened the door and I saw Rick standing there, my heart sank, but my mind went straight into overdrive. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, frozen and completely unsure of what to say. Lisa's face was pale, her usual confident smile nowhere to be found. It was obvious. They both knew they were caught. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. "Rick," I said, keeping my voice calm even though I felt like yelling. "What are you doing here?" He shifted awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. I was just visiting." "Visiting?" I repeated, my tone sharp. "That's interesting because Lisa told me she was at the casino this weekend. So which one of you wants to explain what's actually going on?" Lisa jumped in, stammering. "It's not what it looks like. We were just what?" I cut her off. "Hanging out? Come on, Lisa. I'm not an idiot." Rick, to his credit, or maybe lack of it, stepped forward and owned up. All right, he said. "We've been seeing each other. It's been a couple of weeks." Hearing him say it out loud hit harder than I expected. A part of me still wanted to believe there was some other explanation, no matter how unlikely. But there it was. The truth. Plain and simple. I stared at him for a moment before turning to Lisa. 2 weeks, huh? And what? You just forgot to mention that while we were hanging out?" Lisa's eyes filled with tears, and she started to say something, but I wasn't in the mood for excuses. "Save it," I said, holding up my hand. "I'm not interested." Rick tried to interject. "Look, man, I didn't mean for this to happen. Things just got complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You're my boss. You're supposed to be the one with integrity, not sneaking around like this. And Lisa," I shook my head, looking her up and down. "You could have at least had the guts to tell me instead of playing these games." "I'm sorry," Lisa said softly, tears running down her face. "I never meant to hurt you." "Yeah, well, congratulations," I said. "You both did a great job of that." For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of Lisa sniffling. Then I turned back to Rick. "Let me make one thing clear. This doesn't affect my job. Got it? I've worked hard for my position, and I'm not about to let your personal drama screw that up." Rick nodded quickly. Of course, it won't affect anything, I promise. Good, I said firmly. Because if it does, we're going to have a much bigger problem. I turned back to Lisa, who looked like she wanted to say something else. I wasn't interested. We're done, I told her. Don't call me, don't text me, don't try to explain. As far as I'm concerned, this is over. Without waiting for a response, I walked out and slammed the door behind me. My heart was racing, and my head was spinning, but I knew I'd done the right thing. The next few days at work were awkward, to say the least. Rick avoided me like the plague, and Lisa didn't show up at all. Word spread quickly, and it didn't take long for everyone to know what had happened. I caught a few people giving me pitying looks, which only made things worse. By the following Monday, Lisa was back at work. She tried to approach me a couple of times, but I shut her down every time. We don't have anything to talk about, I told her firmly. She eventually got the message and stopped trying, though I could feel her eyes on me every time we were in the same room. Rick, on the other hand, tried to smooth things over in the most awkward way possible. One afternoon, he cornered me in the break room. Look, he said, shifting nervously. I just wanted to apologize again. I know I messed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I don't want this to make things harder for you at work. I stared at him for a moment, debating whether or not to tell him off. In the end, I decided it wasn't worth the energy. Just don't mess with my hours, I said finally. And we're good, but don't expect us to be friends. Fair enough, Rick said, nodding. I get it. He walked away, and that was the last real conversation we had. From then on, our interactions were strictly professional. It wasn't ideal, but it worked. At home, I was still trying to process everything. A part of me felt stupid for not seeing the signs sooner, but another part of me was glad it had ended before things got more serious. I spent a lot of time replaying the confrontation in my head, wondering if I could have handled it differently. But in the end, I knew I had done the best I could under the circumstances. What I didn't realize at the time was that this whole mess was far from over. Rick and Lisa might have thought they'd gotten away with their betrayal, but karma had other plans for both of them, and I was about to see it all unfold. After the confrontation, I thought the worst of it was behind me. Rick had agreed to keep things professional. Lisa was out of my life, and I was determined to move on. But in a workplace like ours, drama has a way of sticking around longer than you'd think. It wasn't long before I started noticing cracks in Rick's reputation. People were talking about his sudden disappearances, unexplained decisions, and rumors that he was bending the rules. At first, I stayed out of it. I wasn't looking to stir the pot. I just wanted to do my job and keep my head down. Then Jenny, one of my coworkers, approached me. She was in her early 20s, sharp, and had a sense of humor that made even the worst days bearable. We'd always gotten along well, but I had no idea she'd been casually seeing Rick. So, she said one afternoon, pulling up a chair next to me in the break room, I heard about you and Lisa. I groaned, already tired of the gossip. What about us? Jenny raised an eyebrow. Don't play dumb. Everyone knows what happened. Rick's been acting weird ever since. I shrugged, trying to brush it off. Yeah, well, that's his problem, not mine. She leaned in, lowering her voice. You know, I was seeing him too. Nothing serious, but now I feel like an idiot. I didn't know about you and Lisa until it all came out. That caught my attention. Wait, you were seeing him while he was messing around with Lisa? Jenny nodded, rolling her eyes. Apparently. Guess I dodged a bullet, huh? I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Yeah, I'd say so. She smirked. You know, we should go out sometime. Really give them something to talk about. At first, I thought she was joking, but the more I thought about it, the more I liked the idea. It wasn't about revenge. Well, maybe a little, but it also sounded like fun. All right, I said finally. Why not? Jenny and I started hanging out, and to my surprise, we clicked right away. She was smart, funny, and didn't take life too seriously. It wasn't a serious relationship, just two people having fun and making the best of a bad situation. The best part? Watching Rick squirm. Word spread quickly about me and Jenny, and it clearly got under his skin. One day, a coworker asked me, loud enough for everyone to hear, how my date went. Best trade I've ever made, I said with a grin. Rick, who was walking by at that exact moment, stopped dead in his tracks. He didn't say anything, just turned and walked away, but the look on his face was priceless. Lisa, on the other hand, wasn't so subtle. She glared at me every chance she got, her jaw tight like she wanted to say something but couldn't. It was almost funny how much power I had over her, simply by ignoring her existence. But things really started heating up during our weekly employee sales. Every Friday, employees could buy discounted boxes of meat. The process was simple. Pay at the receptionist's desk, get a ticket, and bring it to the warehouse to collect your order. One Friday, Rick told me he was taking 10 boxes and would pay on his way out. I didn't think much of it until I noticed him walking straight past the receptionist's desk without stopping. My curiosity got the better of me, so I called the plant accountant and asked him to check the records. Sure enough, there was no ticket, no cash, nothing. It didn't take long for word to spread, and Rick found himself under investigation. Turns out this wasn't the first time he'd conveniently forgotten to pay for something. The higher-ups started digging, and the more they uncovered, the worse it got. Within a week, Rick was fired. Watching him pack up his office and walk out for the last time was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. But karma wasn't done yet. A few weeks later, Lisa found herself in hot water. Someone had reported missing money from the receptionist's cash box, and the company decided to run a little test. They had an employee pay with a $100 bill, then waited to see if it would show up in the records. It didn't. That was the final nail in Lisa's coffin. She was fired on the spot, and just like Rick, she left without a word. By the time the dust settled, I felt like I'd come out on top in every possible way. I got rid of a cheating girlfriend, had some fun with Jenny, exposed both Rick and Lisa for the liars they were, and managed to keep my job intact. Jenny and I eventually went our separate ways, but we parted on good terms. She helped me turn a bad situation into something I could actually laugh about, and for that, I'll always be grateful. As for Rick and Lisa, well, let's just say karma didn't stop with their firings. After Rick and Lisa were gone, the air at work felt lighter. It was as if the entire department had been holding its breath, waiting for the drama to end. With both of them out of the picture, things could finally settle down. Or so I thought. Not long after Rick's departure, my manager called me into his office. "Michael," he began, "we've been really impressed with how you've handled things. It hasn't been easy, but you've kept your head down and done your job." I nodded, not sure where he was going with this. "We've decided to promote you to department superintendent," he said. "It'll be a trial period at first, but if all goes well, the position will be yours permanently." The words hit me like a truck, not because I didn't think I was capable, but because it was Rick's old job. The idea of stepping into his shoes was daunting. There was a lot of baggage tied to that position, and I wasn't sure how the rest of the team would react. "Thank you," I said finally. "I won't let you down." Taking over Rick's position wasn't easy. The department was a mess, and I quickly realized how much damage he'd done. Equipment was overdue for maintenance, scheduling was chaotic, and morale was at an all-time low. It was clear that Rick had been coasting for years, doing the bare minimum while collecting a paycheck. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. The first thing I did was address the equipment issues, pushing through repairs that had been ignored for far too long. Then I tackled the schedules, making sure shifts were fair and balanced. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was necessary. At first, there was some pushback from the team. Some of them still saw me as just another coworker, and a few grumbled that I'd only gotten the job because of what happened with Rick. I ignored the whispers and let my work speak for itself. Slowly but surely, things started to turn around. Machines ran smoother, shifts ran on time, and people started showing up to work in better moods. Seeing the department improve was incredibly rewarding, but the best part was earning the respect of my team. Meanwhile, the company was still digging into Lisa's actions. After they caught her skimming money from the cash box, they decided to do a full audit of her records. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Lisa had been pocketing cash for months, maybe even longer. Her methods were sloppy. She wasn't as clever as she probably thought she was, but it was clear she'd been doing it for a while. Co-workers started coming forward with stories about Lisa borrowing money and forgetting to pay it back. It turned out her reputation wasn't exactly spotless, outside of work either. Kelly, the new receptionist, called me over one day to share what she'd found. "It's honestly ridiculous," she said, shaking her head. "The gaps in her records are so obvious. I don't know how no one noticed earlier. People were probably too busy dealing with her drama to dig into it," I replied. Kelly nodded. "Well, they're not missing it now. She really screwed herself over." I didn't feel bad for Lisa. She'd made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. One day, I ran into Rick at the grocery store. He was pushing a cart of cheap frozen dinners and looked as miserable as you'd expect. He spotted me and hesitated for a moment before walking over. "Hey, Michael," he said awkwardly. I nodded. "Rick." There was a long pause before he said, "I heard you got my old job. Congratulations." "Thanks," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know I screwed up. I just wanted to say I'm sorry again. For everything." I stared at him for a moment, debating whether or not to let him off the hook. Finally, I said, I appreciate the apology, but we're not friends, and we're never going to be. Rick nodded, looking defeated. Fair enough. He walked away without another word, and I didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. Rick had made his choices, just like Lisa, and now they were both dealing with the fallout. By the time my trial period ended, my promotion was made permanent. It felt like a fresh start, not just for me, but for the whole department. We'd been through a lot, but we came out stronger on the other side. Looking back, I wouldn't say I'm glad any of it happened, but I'm proud of how I handled it. Sometimes life throws you into situations you don't expect, and all you can do is make the best of them. For me, that meant turning a workplace disaster into an opportunity to prove myself. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. With Rick and Lisa out of the picture and my promotion officially secured, I finally felt like I was on solid ground again. The department was running better than ever, my team was behind me, and I was making strides in my career. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I could leave the drama behind me and focus on moving forward. But life has a funny way of reminding you that some stories don't end as cleanly as you'd like. One afternoon, I got a call from Tim, a former coworker who had left the company shortly after Rick's firing. "Hey, you'll never guess who I ran into the other day," he said, his voice practically dripping with amusement. "Who?" I asked, already bracing myself. "Rick," Tim replied. "He looked rough, man. Said he's been struggling to find work. Apparently, word got around about what happened, and no one wants to take a chance on him." I couldn't say I was surprised. Rick's reputation was shot, and in our industry, people talked. If you crossed the wrong line, it wasn't long before everyone knew about it. Still, hearing it out loud gave me mixed feelings. Part of me felt vindicated. He deserved the fallout for everything he'd done. But another part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. He had been my boss, after all, and there was a time when I respected him. Then again, that respect had died the second he walked into Lisa's apartment. "Well," I said finally, "he made his bed. Now he has to lie in it." Tim laughed. "No argument there. Just thought you'd want to know." As for Lisa, I didn't hear much about her until months later, when I stumbled across a post on social media. Someone had shared a story about their experience working with a woman who sounded suspiciously like Lisa. "She started out nice enough," the post read, "but it didn't take long for her true colors to show. She was constantly gossiping, stirring up drama, and, oh yeah, stealing money from the register. Can't say I was surprised when she got fired." I couldn't help but laugh. It seemed like no matter where she went, Lisa couldn't escape her bad habits. It was almost poetic in a way. Her actions had finally caught up with her, and she was paying the price. While Rick and Lisa were struggling, I was thriving. My new role as department superintendent wasn't easy, but it was rewarding. I had the chance to make real changes, improve the way things were run, and build a team that trusted me. One Friday during our weekly employee sales, Kelly, the new receptionist, called me over. "Michael, you've got to see this," she said, holding up a spreadsheet. "What's up?" I asked, leaning over the counter. "Look at these numbers," she said, pointing to a column of discrepancies. "These are all from Lisa's time here. I mean, we knew she was stealing, but seeing it laid out like this is something else." I shook my head, marveling at the audacity. "How did she think she'd get away with it for so long?" Kelly smirked. "Some people think they're untouchable. Guess she learned the hard way." I nodded, filing the information away as a reminder of how far the department had come since those chaotic days. Lisa's mistakes had cost her everything, but they'd also given me the opportunity to step up and prove myself. On a more personal level, I'd started to find my footing again. After things with Jenny fizzled out, I took a break from dating to focus on myself. I wasn't in any rush to jump into another relationship, especially after everything that had happened with Lisa. Instead, I spent my free time doing things I enjoyed: fishing, hiking, and even taking a weekend trip to the mountains. It was the first time in years that I felt truly at peace, and it reminded me of the importance of putting myself first. One evening, while sitting by the lake, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I found myself reflecting on the past year. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd end up in this position, promoted, respected, and genuinely happy, I wouldn't have believed them. But here I was. Back at work, things continued to improve. One day, my manager stopped by to check in. "Michael," he said, clapping me on the shoulder, "you've done an incredible job here. The department's numbers are the best they've been in years. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." Hearing that felt like the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just about the promotion or the paycheck. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above the chaos and come out stronger on the other side. Looking back, I wouldn't say I'm glad everything happened the way it did. Getting cheated on and dealing with workplace drama wasn't exactly a picnic, but I can't deny that it shaped me into the person I am today. If Lisa hadn't cheated with Rick, I might have stayed in that relationship longer than I should have. If Rick hadn't gotten caught stealing, I might not have gotten the chance to step into his role. It's strange how life works sometimes, how the worst moments can lead to the best opportunities. Now, years later, I can honestly say I'm in a better place. I've built a career I'm proud of, surrounded myself with people I trust, and learned to spot red flags from a mile away. Would I do anything differently if I could go back? Probably not. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let life unfold and make the most of what comes your way. And if nothing else, at least I got a great story out of it. Final update. It's been years since everything happened, and I've had plenty of time to reflect on it all. Life has a way of moving forward whether you're ready or not, and sometimes distance gives you the clarity you didn't know you needed. Looking back now, it's almost funny how much chaos came from such a ridiculous situation. After Rick and Lisa were out of my life, I poured everything I had into my work and personal growth. Those first few years in my new role as superintendent were a grind, but they set the foundation for everything that came after. Eventually, I moved on to bigger opportunities, taking leadership positions at other companies, and even starting a consulting gig on the side. One of the most unexpected things to come out of all this was the respect I gained from my team. Back then, I thought I was just doing my job, but the people who worked under me saw it differently. Over the years, I've stayed in touch with a few of them, and every time we catch up, they remind me of how much my leadership during that chaotic time meant to them. It's a humbling feeling and something I'll always carry with me. About 2 years after everything happened, I got an unexpected message on social media. It was from Lisa. She started with a simple, "Hey, it's been a while. I hope you're doing well." At first, I debated whether or not to reply. What could she possibly have to say after all this time? Curiosity got the better of me, so I opened the message. She apologized again for what had happened, saying she regretted how things ended and how she treated me. She talked about how her life had fallen apart after losing her job at the plant, how it had been hard for her to find work, and how she'd been trying to start over. It wasn't what I expected, but it also wasn't surprising. Lisa always had a way of deflecting responsibility while making herself the victim. I kept my response short and polite. "I appreciate the apology," I wrote, "but I've moved on. I hope you can do the same." That was the last time I heard from her. Rick, on the other hand, faded into the background. I occasionally heard updates about him through old coworkers, mostly that he was still struggling to find steady work and had burned through his savings. Part of me wondered if he ever really understood the impact of his actions. But honestly, it didn't matter. He was out of my life, and that was enough. As for me, life moved on in the best possible way. A few years after leaving the plant, I met someone who changed everything. She was smart, kind, and had this incredible ability to make me feel like I was the only person in the room. From the beginning, our relationship was built on trust and mutual respect, something I hadn't realized I was missing until I found it. We've been married for 5 years now, and every day I'm grateful for the path that led me here. It wasn't always easy, but every bump in the road taught me something valuable. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole experience, it's that you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. At the time, finding out about Rick and Lisa felt like the end of the world, but it was really just the beginning of a better chapter in my life. Now, when I look back, I don't feel anger or resentment. I feel a sense of closure. Rick and Lisa were just lessons in disguise, teaching me what I deserved and what I was capable of. So, to anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, hang in there. Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. And sometimes the biggest messes lead to the most unexpected opportunities. Here's to moving on, moving up, and never looking back.